Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. It is once again Hot Routes on a Monday night, as I know the universe will probably not be tuning in, Manny, because they are so captivated by Seahawks and Giants. People all over the world saying, no, I can't miss a minute of Troy Aikman's commentary on Daniel Jones's quarterback play. Who would have ever thought a few weeks into Daniel Jones's season after he signed a huge contract and isn't playing the Vikings defense every week that he would be disappointing? But for those of you who are joining, welcome to the live stream and listening on the podcast version as well. Manny, I got a question for you to start out the show. Here's a question. Let's say I like meters. I like confidence meters, panic meters, things like that. Let's say that going 0-3 and going into Carolina, your meter of confidence that the Vikings could turn it around was probably fairly low. After the win and everything you saw, did your confidence meter in the 2023 version of the Minnesota Vikings move? Did it move at all? I mean, of course, it wouldn't have decreased with a loss, I wouldn't think, but maybe since Kirk Cousins didn't play that well, maybe it did. Where was it before, and where did it move to after that win?
I think if you're putting it on like a scale type of like a meter scale, I think going into the game, you're probably looking at I felt about a 3 or 4, maybe in terms of just like turning the season around and maybe getting into the playoffs after the 0-3 start. It didn't really move much for me after the game. I mean, it just wasn't it felt like they went into Carolina. They played a bad team with a rookie quarterback that is struggling and has not found himself yet. And they did kind of what they were supposed to do. They won the game. It wasn't pretty. I don't think Kirk Cousins played particularly well. I thought the defense made some plays, but part of that was just Bryce Young being bad and the Panthers just being a bad team. So they kind of just took care of business and did what they needed to do. Which against a bad team like Carolina, you didn't have to do much to be able to beat them. Carolina kind of beat themselves as well. So I don't know if the meter really moved for me at all. It's nice that they got the win because it means that, you know, we can at least put off sort of waving the white flag for at least one more week. We'll see if that changes this coming Sunday against Kansas City. But yeah, I would say at this point, it's just I feel about the same as I did before the game on Sunday.
I think that that's fair. But one of the things that we like to do on the show is play a game of Talk Me Into. And so let me try. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that I necessarily believe everything I'm about to say, but let me give it a shot. Let me try to convince you to move your confidence meter a little bit higher. All right. Here's where I'm going to begin. First, you saw the Packers play, right? Not so great. Not so, talk about not convincing. The Packers are not convincing. If you told me that you think the Packers are decidedly better than the Vikings, I would call bogus. I don't think that there's been enough evidence to say that Green Bay is better. So you have 2 games against Chicago, 2 games against the Green Bay Packers, where I don't know about Jordan Love yet. I think he can play competently, but he also has a lot of bad throws mixed in. All right, you got some winnable games. You have Vegas, you have Denver that barely survived Chicago. Oh, do you get to play Desmond Ridder? Maybe if he's still the starting quarterback. That's not bad. How hurt is Derek Carr? Are they going to be able to move the ball more than about 5 yards at a time with his AC joint sprain? All of a sudden, after this little run here where you face Kansas City and San Francisco with Chicago in between, the schedule opens up quite a bit. So it would require an upset of one of those teams or beating Detroit twice, which looks like it's going to be a pretty hard task toward the end of the season to get them past like a 7 or 8 wins and be in that range of making the playoffs. But that's part of it, is the schedule is not that tough, and I'm not that sold on Green Bay. The other part is that Cam Akers adds a different dimension that was not there before. We saw that instantly of having a yin and a yang in the backfield, somebody with some explosiveness to them. He was great. 5 runs for 40 yards. I don't expect him to average 8 yards a carry all the time, but I think you saw it right there. Like, oh yeah, that guy was a high draft pick. So the running game has really turned around the last couple of weeks. It was probably based on the fact that they were playing Tampa Bay and Philly. And on the defensive side, and this is a big if, but if Marcus Davenport is on this football team week in and week out, going into any game, you feel like he can cause some problems and be a partner for Danielle Hunter that they were really lacking in the first couple of games. And in this game, and I think my confidence has never been low on Brian Flores. The question was always, how much can Brian Flores really do? Because of his track record, we know he knows what he's doing on the defensive side. But we really saw it against Carolina. When you're not facing Justin Herbert, who might be a top 5 to 7 quarterback in the league, when you're not facing the Philadelphia Eagles, who are competing for a Super Bowl, and I know that is the standard, but we're talking about just getting it turned around and make playoffs. If you are facing a Derek Carr, a Desmond Ritter, a Justin Fields, a Aiden O'Connell, I don't know. It looks like this defense is going to cause a lot of problems for those quarterbacks going the rest of the way. And especially with Harrison Smith moving up to the box. He was either at the box or the line of scrimmage, I think, on like 50 plays out of 72 that he was on the field for. That is our Harrison Smith that we know. So I think that they actually are a stronger team today than they were week one. They're getting Garrett Bradbury back, and possibly at some point we'll have Dalton Risner playing right guard, but I don't know if that's happening. I don't know why it's not happening. We didn't get a great answer for why it's not happening. But still, right? There's the potential there to pass block better, and they already have an all-world wide receiver who's driving their offense. Did I make a good case? How did I do trying to talk you into it?
I think you made a pretty good case. I think what it comes down to, though, is because of that, remember we talked after week one, after the loss to Tampa Bay, we brought up, okay, if you lose to a team that you probably shouldn't have lost to, you're going to have to make that up down the road. And your margin for error just got that much smaller. You can't have any more stumbles. You got to take care of business against every inferior opponent that you face the rest of the way. And I think that's going to be the most important thing for them. You brought up the schedule. You're talking about teams like Chicago, Denver, Las Vegas. Maybe the Packers are not as good as, maybe they had looked the first couple of weeks of the season. You can't have any stumbles the rest of the way. And you still have to, maybe steal a game that you shouldn't win to kind of make up for that Tampa Bay loss, to kind of get you back on track. Is that against Kansas City this coming Sunday? Who knows? We'll see. Is that San Francisco in a couple of weeks? We'll see. But I think if they can do that, steal one of those games, like you said, and just don't stumble the rest of the way. Beat the teams that you should beat, especially if you're going up against, just bad quarterbacks or just backup quarterbacks for whatever reason. Don't have any sort of slip ups against those teams the rest of the way. And then I think if they do that, then I think they'll be in pretty good shape to possibly win 9 or 10 games and still get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and what you just laid out there was almost the problem in Carolina. And that's why, even though I just put together a pretty good pitch, in my opinion, I tried my hardest. I reached my deepest, Manny. But the problem is they won by 8 against the Carolina team that was a strip sack away, a really good bounce. We talked about the bad bounces they've gotten, but a really favorable bounce away from going up 16-7 late in that game. And then the way that Kirk Cousins was playing, not really sure if there's going to be a chance to turn that around. And we just know that over a season, over 17 games, I was thinking about this, the baseball stat, quality starts. I was thinking about it like this, and it's something in baseball where the pitcher has to go 6 innings and give up 3 runs or less. And, it's whatever. No one goes 6 innings anymore. So this stat used to be useful and it isn't. But let's just say if we had a football stat for that, for Kirk Cousins, let's say it was, whatever amount of efficiency, whatever PFF grade, whatever ESPN QBR, and that made for a quality start. So his metrics, of course, from the Carolina game were horrific, as bad as I've ever seen them for Kirk. That's not a quality start. He probably had 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 quality starts in the first couple of games. So the rest of the way, even if he has 2 out of 4, 3 out of every 4, you need all of them to be quality starts against those bad teams you're supposed to beat. You cannot have something like that. And Carolina has a bad defense. I mean, they were giving up everything on the ground game. Their corners were hurt. They really can't pressure the quarterback outside of Brian Burns and Derek Brown. I mean, that should have been a game where you run away. You win by 20. And I kept thinking that, like, all right, they'll get it together and do that. One of the issues is with their passing game, which, no surprise by the expected points, things like that, they're kind of right in the middle with their passing game so far this year, even though their yardage totals are high. But if you adjust for, game situation and stuff, they're pretty average. Is that it's still the Justin Jefferson show and the Justin Jefferson show only. I mean, Jordan Addison has a couple big touchdowns. KJ Osborne had one against the Chargers that was a big play. Hawkinson is averaging 8 yards a catch. Like, it's got to be better than that. It's got to be better. I mean, you're talking about long handoffs at that point. I mean, to TJ Hawkinson. And if that is not better, then you're not going to do this. It's really simple. You're not going to do this. That Jefferson by PFF has a 91 grade. The only guy higher is Tyreek Hill. No surprise. The next best receiver, not Hawkinson, is 61. That cannot be the case. It just simply cannot. And so even though Addison has made some good plays, they've got to involve other people or they're not going anywhere. And I think that that's the hardest part of the argument is, could Kirk Cousins have quality starts in 75% of his games the rest of the way? It's never really been who he is. So you're going to have to probably win some games where he's not that good. Can you get Bryce Young every week? Probably not. And then you have to establish some other people here in the receiving game, because if it's only Justin Jefferson, it's going to be boom or bust, as it's pretty much been for Justin Jefferson's entire time here.
And in addition to that, for the love of God, they've got to stop turning the ball over. I mean, they've got, what is it, 11 turnovers now in 4 games? I mean, that's just outrageous. You just can't give the ball to the other team. And I know sometimes, you turn the ball over, as to quote Kirk Cousins, not all fumbles are created equal. Sometimes things just happen and you don't really have much control over it. Players are going to make mistakes and they're going to fumble the football, but it's the avoidable turnovers. Those are the ones that you gotta limit. The pick six that Kirk threw on the first drive yesterday, I mean, it completely flipped the game to start things out. I mean, the Vikings are moving and getting themselves in a position to take the lead, to sort of set the tone for the rest of the game, and then that happens. And it was just a bad decision by Kirk Cousins to throw that ball. He held onto the ball a little bit too long, and that makes all the difference in the world in a play like that. And it literally put them behind by 7 points. It was a pick six. That's the kind of stuff that they have to avoid. Just the costly turnovers that are just boneheaded decisions, sort of shooting themselves in the foot. They've got to avoid that type of stuff. You're not going to be able to do that against Kansas City on Sunday and find a way to win. Like that, it's just not going to work when you're going up against the greatest player in the world and the best tight end in the league as well. So they're going to have to clean some of that stuff up, find some more consistency offensively, and then I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, the consistency offensively is just something that we always have been baffled by during the Kirk Cousins era. And to your point about the turnovers, so I was just checking the numbers on his turnovers historically. So if you go back to 2020, since then, he averages 12 interceptions per 17 games. He's got 4 already. I mean, interceptions can be weird and random, but he's a double-digit interception guy. It's just kind of who he is. He threw with O'Connell, especially 14 last year. And every time they've leaned into the passing game, he's going to get to double digits. He also has historically fumbled the football a lot. And that's in part by, taking sacks. But 2021, he had 12 fumbles, 7 last year, 4 already this year. So it's not like the spigot just turns off and suddenly the turnovers go poof and you won't turn the ball over ever again. It was kind of like, yeah, some of the fumbles are random and some of the turnovers are not random. And also, I'm not really sure, even though what's going on at right guard is pretty hideous, I'm not really sure that they're ready to put Dalton Reisner in. We just assumed that he was ready to play and throw him in and it's go time. Like if you sign him on Madden, like, okay, week 2, my guard's bad. Let me throw in a guy and just plug him in there. But in the real football, they have to judge it by, is he in shape to play a full season, or a full game to start and then the full season after not having an off season? Is he actually an upgrade? And one of the things I've wondered about, Manny, is these last 2 weeks, they have been phenomenal running the football. And I think that you and I probably focus so much more on the passing part and the big negative play that was given up. But I think if you're the offensive line coach, Chris Cooper, you're more likely grading out on everything and not just, that one part of it. And their running attack has been really good, and their run blocking has been really good over these last 2 weeks. And what is Dalton Reisner's biggest weakness? It's the run game. And so they might feel like, okay, these guys have played better. It was just one mistake. You'd also like, and I'm not blaming him, okay? No, zero blame. You'd like him to move a little bit when there's some pressure, but it's not going to happen. So they might grade that one out and say, look, he let go of the block, but Cousins, whatever. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure, but I'm hunting for explanations since Kevin O'Connell went with, we're playing the best five, which is like, so do you not think Dalton Reisner is the best five? I don't know what's going to happen there exactly. And then we're going to wonder, so why did you sign him? I mean, because there are a lot of positions on this team, including edge rusher, where it's linebacker, cornerback, where they just went for, hey, young guy, figure it out. But with this, they sign Reisner, so you think, all right, well, they're not going with young guy figured out, but now they are. It's a little bit puzzling, Manny.
It is, and I wonder too. To your point about Dalton Reisner, I wonder too if we were so anxious to see him get into the game right away as soon as they signed him off the street, essentially. I wonder if part of that was just because we had watched Ed Ingram perform so poorly in pass protection the first couple of games of the year, where it's just like, well, it can't possibly be worse than this if you put Dalton Reisner in. But look, they see these guys every day in practice. They know so much more about this than even you and I might. They might be seeing something that might be indicating he's not quite ready yet. We need a week or two to get him into game shape, make sure he's got the scheme down, and then we can put him in. And then the run blocking angle of that is that's a important thing. I mean, the Vikings have been able to run the ball pretty well the last couple of weeks. Alexander Madison's been really solid. Cam Akers got into the game yesterday, and he was really productive. They might feel like they have something going here with the running game, and if Ed Ingram can just get a little bit better in pass protection, not going to hold my breath for that, but maybe they're hoping like if he can show a little bit of improvement there and not just completely like shell shock this offense at any given moment, like he almost did when on that second interception yesterday. If that can happen, then okay, maybe we can survive this, and it's still nice to have Dalton Reisner in our back pocket because hey, somebody else on the offensive line could get hurt. Ed Ingram, knock on wood, could get hurt. And it'd be good to have a guy that's at least can step in and play a couple of different positions on the line.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's how they're looking at it, or maybe it's just conditioning. I mean, without a clear answer, we don't really know what the deal is. But also, it seems that maybe there was some inspiration for the two linemen to listen to their coaching a little better, or maybe it's just that competition has not been that high the last 2 weeks. The Chargers and the Panthers do not have two of the better defensive lines to go against, and they got pushed around by this offensive line. Now it's going to be Kansas City. Kansas City is a much better, especially with Chris Jones, offensive line. Or defensive line. So we might see a change if Ed Ingram is struggling, but in my mind, I've seen enough. Like, I've got a pretty big sample of what we've seen here. The other thing too is that Ingram barely had to pass block on Sunday. I mean, there was only 21 dropbacks, and he was sacked on 2 of them, and then had his arm hit. It was the only pressure that Ingram gave up. But even one pressure in 20 dropbacks is not like that good because you're dropping back so little. High Times KG says, what was the point of bringing, I assume you mean Reisner, in? They already know if they already knew Ingram was a better run blocker. I mean, that's the question. And maybe they were so frustrated by those first couple of weeks that they just said, you know what, pull the lever. use the Reisner phone. Hey, Dalton, like it's time. But then the last 2 weeks, their guys have played more up to par, even though I didn't think so against Los Angeles. I thought that Ingram was their worst pass blocker. There were several third downs that Cousins got pressured and hit. So I don't know. Maybe it just needs one more week of him getting into shape to play, and we'll see what happens this week. But if he is there and they are pass blocking better, I do have more belief that their passing game could be a little more consistent and a little more successful on third downs, where I think that they've really struggled to keep these drives going, and that's how they end up having punts. And then I think what is like 4 turnovers that are directly on the right guard. There's several strip sacks and then the arm being hit, which might as well be a strip sack. It goes down as a pick, but that's too bad, by the way. Like that's a box score. I was just talking about Kirk's picks. Like that's a box score issue. That's more of a strip sack on the right guard. But speaking of Kirk, actually, let's talk about Kirk in a second, but let's talk about pizza first, Manny. You guys, if you're watching the show, I know you love pizza and football. So you should make Little Caesars the official pizza sponsor of the NFL part of your game day. Order online during their Pizza pregame 1 hour before NFL games and get ready for some football and fun. Choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza. Pick the toppings you crave. Either way, you win. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or their in-store pizza pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the tastiest hour before kickoff. Are we done talking about Kirk being traded? What do you think?
For this week, yeah, probably. Just because they won. I mean, it doesn't really even have anything to do with Kirk's play yesterday either. But I think because they won the game yesterday and their season is still, I think, mildly alive. I think for now we kind of just push those rumors and the conversations aside a little bit. But man, if they, you look at their schedule again, the Kansas City game is just huge, and the San Francisco game coming up, the Chicago game. I mean, Soldier Field's always been a house of horrors for the Vikings on the road, So these next 3 games, I think, are really going to determine. So what day is the trade deadline? What week is that?
That is now, unlike our childhood, Manny, that is now week 8. It was week
Okay.
6 before, and that's why there were never any trades.
Yeah. So, okay. So if you go to week 8, you got Kansas City, Chicago, San Francisco, Green Bay, the next 4 games. All right. 1-3 now. If they can get themselves to like 3-5 or 4-4, I think you can probably put the Kirk trade rumors to bed, up to that point of the trade deadline. But you lose to Kansas City, you stumble at Chicago, and then the Niners come in and beat you. Now you're 1-6 going into Lambeau, and then at that point, I think it's open season for all of the Kirk trade rumors at that point.
Yeah, and I think that 2-5, because I think it's after week 7 before
Okay.
week 8. I'm thinking. I'm trying to remember from past years, because the Vikings. I mean, I remember them trading away Yannick Ngakoue, and I can't remember what they were at that point. They must have been no, because they got a win in Green Bay to go to 2-5, and then they traded Yannick Ngakoue, I think. But they didn't trade anybody else, so they tried to turn it around. At 2-5, I think they still go for it. I think that they'll look at their schedule and say there's a lot of wins going forward. Even if they were to lose both of these games against Kansas City and San Francisco and beat Chicago, they'll say, all right, we're 3 games out of 500, but the NFC's got a lot of problems. The South is still utter garbage. I mean, you probably in the East, you've got a case for maybe 2 teams making it, of course, because you have Dallas and Philadelphia. You got Seattle that's in the mix. You'd need something to go wrong for one of those 3 teams, but then you've got a case. Like Green Bay, of course, is still in position to be a playoff team, but I'm not convinced. That's the whole point. It's like they're vulnerable, and then we're already seeing the race take shape. At 2-5, I think they would have a chance to at least turn it around, and they would not give up on the season because they would look at their upcoming schedule. The problem is with that, the upcoming schedule thing is, even though a lot of those teams are bad, a lot of those games are on the road. And so you could always lose. I mean, the Raiders are horrendous, but they almost tied the game against the Chargers after starting Aiden O'Connell and having him sacked 6 times by the same player. Like, it's a very much an any given Sunday take, but like you can lose one of those games, especially on the road. So that one is a pretty tough to convince that 2-5 could get you there. But I think they would think that, just like the 2020 version of this team did. At 1-6, it becomes a little more toasty. Then it becomes a little more spicy to discuss. Is it time to trade Kirk? Because even if, and then the other element is Zach Wilson just played a legit, very, very good game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And if he plays similar to that going forward and gets some confidence and they found some offense that works for him, they're not going to make a trade either. Or if they're out of it as well, they're not going to make a trade. Atlanta's in this discussion, but I don't know who else is. I mean, there's only one scenario that I thought of, Manny. That is the Vikings play San Francisco and Marcus Davenport rolls up on Brock Purdy's ankle. And Brock is out for the year, and Kirk travels back to San Francisco with them. That's the only thing I thought about. Kind of like you alluded to this last week. Like Purdy has had some injuries already. If that were to happen, I think that would have to be it though, because Atlanta is probably the only team I could think of right now whose quarterback play is so bad and they're trying to win. And if it's not the Jets, it just seems like the odds after that win and Zach Wilson's play went way, way down to barely a flicker at this point that it could actually happen.
Yeah, and even going back to, from the Viking standpoint in terms of like where they'll be at by the time, week 7, the trade deadline comes up. I mean, even if they're like 2-5, what if Detroit is in first place, but they're like 4-3 at that point? Then you're 2 games back. At least they're in their mind, they're thinking, okay, well, we're 2-5, but we're only 2 games back in the division, and we still get to play Detroit twice later in the season. If we can win a few games in a row and sort of keep pace with the Lions a little bit, there would be no reason, I think, at that point for them to sort of punt on the season, if they still think that they can have an outside chance of winning the division.
Yeah, and Blantos brings up that Danielle Hunter trade would make more sense, and I agree with that. Also, I mean, Lee is bringing up the cap implications. I mean, that's the thing, is that it was already, in my mind, almost impossible because of cap implications and the fact that, I think Kevin O'Connell wants to fight it out. I don't think Justin Jefferson would enjoy playing with Nick Mullins instead, because he knows that he's going to have a chance to win each week with Kirk Cousins. So I think it's dead. I think it's DOA. Like it's over. It probably was never alive, but I think it's over after that. Unless, I mean, if they lose at Chicago, maybe it starts to flicker. I'm not sure. I just don't see it. I think they're going to play it out, and they might as well. I know that there's always the fear of not getting a high enough draft pick, but I'm not that concerned about that. I wanted to ask you a couple other things, though, just about around the NFL and what we saw on Sunday. And if you're not overreacting, you're not living with the NFL. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, what do you want anybody to do? They play one game a week. Yeah, like this is what we have. But Buffalo's win over Miami, I think it was last week we were talking about who our power ranks would be at the top, who our Super Bowl predictions would be at the top. And I don't remember if I said this or not, but if I didn't, I should have, which is I want to see how they play at Buffalo. I know what that atmosphere is like. I know they have one of the best coaches in the NFL, who everyone wanted fired after week 1, by the way. One of the hands down best coaches in the league. Stephon Diggs goes legend, as he often does. They crush Miami. They solve a lot of Mike McDaniel's tomfoolery, and I just couldn't be more impressed. I mean, that team has looked like a absolute 100% Super Bowl contender, and in my mind, since week 1, which is random and weird, the best team in the NFL, I think, is probably Buffalo right now after that win.
Yeah, and when you look at the way things have kind of gone for them over the last year, I mean, the DeMar Hamlin stuff obviously took such an emotional toll on that team. But then you lose that playoff game at home to Cincinnati. Stephon Diggs is pissed off and he's mad because he's such a competitor and he hates losing, and And he wants the football thrown to him. Let's be honest. We know how Stephon is. He wants the ball, as many star wide receivers do. But there was, I think, after they lost last year, there was kind of that question of, okay, is the window starting to close on them a little bit? It's not shut, but like Cincinnati is this up and coming team that made another kind of deep run, and Kansas City's not going anywhere anytime soon. Are the Bills kind of, was their best chance for a championship, maybe these last couple of years? And then you get all the question marks about, what happened to them in week one, losing that game to the Jets. But man, have they answered the call the last 3 weeks. And, I know whooping up on the Raiders week two, the Raiders are not a very good team, but if you're a great team and you're playing a bad team, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to annihilate them. You're supposed to dominate them. And they've just been fantastic. Offensively, they've been great. That defense, man, that defense is unbelievable. And they've been really good for the last few years. So hats off to Sean McDermott for, turning that thing around, and Leslie Frazier and all those guys. It's they just look like a complete football team right now. I think what are they? I think they're, just four games into the season, but they're second in scoring and they're second in scoring defense. Like, that's, you're top 5 in both categories. I mean, you're a legit dominant team, and the Bills look fantastic right now.
You know what they remind me of with Josh Allen, and I know it's done in a different way, but kind of like the Indianapolis Colts, where Peyton Manning had some playoff disappointments. And you could throw this out there for like New Orleans with Drew Brees, like teams with elite quarterbacks, where they would have some playoff disappointments, but you just knew that if they kept going back and kept going back and kept going back, that they were going to win at some point. And I'll give you a comparison historically, not that far back historically, for what the Buffalo Bills are right now. I think they're the Roethlisberger era Pittsburgh Steelers, where they have some great receiver play, an absolute baller quarterback with a ton of guts, and a defensive minded head coach who every year, every week is throwing out a great defensive game plan. And they can be volatile a little bit because of their quarterback and the way that he plays, erratic at times, the same way that Ben Roethlisberger would be. And sometimes the passing stats are not always beautiful, but they are going to find a way to win a lot of games. And I mean, you said it, when you've got that type of point differential like that opens your eyes. I saw that, Aaron Schatz and his DVOA has them as one of the strongest 3-1 teams ever. I mean, they lost on a punt return. Like, what are you going to do? And a couple of bad interceptions. But since then, they have been a dominant team. And then degree of difficulty to crush Miami like that is super impressive. So yeah, I think that they go right at the top. And then San Francisco also. I speak of historical comps. I need you to give me a historical Brock Purdy comp, because I was having this conversation via text with our friend Sage Rosenfels. I want to get Sage on the show before the San Francisco game because he trained Brock Purdy going into the draft. So he knows him extremely well. And so I was asking him about, like, who do you think, like, what's a historical comp? Is he like Case Keenum that's just riding the gravy train? I came up with like Matt Hasselbeck with the Seattle Seahawks, where it's not the best athlete, it's not the biggest arm, but the guy's kind of gutsy and like finds a way and has a great team around him. But every week he continues to get more confident, more accurate. And it doesn't look like it's just a guy who's sort of luck boxing into a great team. It looks like a legitimate quarterback. So I don't know. What do you got?
Yeah, Matt Hasselbeck's a great comp. Another one I was thinking of too, and you can tell me what you think about this, but I thought of kind of like a right-handed Mark Brunell. You know what I mean? Where he's just kind of, Mark Brunell was that guy that, like, he had some really talented receivers around him with Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardell in Jacksonville, really great running back and Fred Taylor, and an offensive line that was really, really solid for a while. And he took advantage of the talent that was around him, and he was just tough. You couldn't really, Mark Brunell towards the end of his career started getting beat up a little bit. But he just hung in there, man. And he didn't have the biggest arm, wasn't a super great athlete, but he could move around and he could run if you needed him to. And that's kind of the same thing with Brock Purdy. It's like the arm isn't like oh my God, look at this amazing arm, but it's good enough. And he can move around and he's just got guts, man. And I remember we had talked about it last year, I think, um, about Brock Purdy, about how just like I wasn't too surprised that he played as well as he did. I didn't know how long it was going to last, if it was going to continue on into this year, but it didn't surprise me that he played fairly well because, I mean, this is a guy that played a lot of games in college at Iowa State and played at a high level, um, was gutsy and tough and competitive and just kind of a winner, just kind of had that winner's, mentality, that intangible. Um, so yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was going to continue on into this season because there were so much questions about his health and his arm after the NFC Championship game last year. But man, he's delivering, man. He's hanging in there, and I think it really kind of shows how good a how good an offensive mind Kyle Shanahan actually is too. Because you take a guy like that you took in the 7th round, he was the last pick in his draft, and he's like literally just balling out. He's taking advantage of what he has around him, and he's delivering, and it's been impressive. It's been fun to see.
I pulled up my text chain with Sage. Says Mark Brunell right there is my other one.
Love
So
it.
we came up with exactly the same. This might be there might be something to this. Brock Purdy from T. Kubler is a mini Brad Johnson. I mean, so when you look at Brad Johnson's career, probably underappreciated for how good he was. He won a heck of a lot more than he lost. He was an accurate quarterback with some guts and with great leadership abilities. And everyone I've ever talked to said that he was like a very relatable person. Like he really connected super well with his teammates. And I think when you talk about that 2002 Tampa Bay Bucks team, that Brad Johnson will never, ever in a million years get any credit for winning because the way the Super Bowl went was all their defense. But he had a good year and he played well. The thing is, though, that like Brock Purdy's putting up legit stats, though. I mean, that was the thing with Brad Johnson, where he'd find a way, and he was a good game manager. And I think even in Washington, for as much of a truck fire as that franchise usually is, he had some good years and won like 10 games one season for them, but was never like putting up huge efficiency numbers, huge stats. I know different era, but maybe that's it. Maybe if you're a Brad Johnson type player in this era where you're not getting clubbed all the time and getting hurt all the time because of the way they play. Maybe that is a really good comparison, and it's a guy with the right team who is certainly good enough to win. So I would have, if we're just going to do this on the fly a little bit, I would have Buffalo, then San Francisco right behind them, because the more Brock Purdy plays, the more we have to buy in to Brock Purdy. And like I've had a chance to watch him a little bit more, like actually watch, and it doesn't seem random or fluky. It doesn't seem just like, oh, well, all the receivers are wide open. You could just throw it this way and it would be fine. Or like, and any old, Trevor Simeon could step in and just, win a bunch of games. I don't think that's the case. I think the guy is really playing at a high level. Who would be after that? Would you still have Miami after that? Or would you flip back on Dallas and say, hey, they just had a bad week in the desert and then they pummeled the New England Patriots? Like, who's after that for you?
Yeah, I was gonna say Dallas. Miami, I think they're still maybe, even though their offense is fantastic still, I think there's still some questions about their defense a little bit. I know, Vic Fangio's been a really good defensive mind, really good coordinator for a long time, but you just kind of wonder if there's going to be enough there. If they do have an off day offensively, is their defense going to be able to sort of pick up some of that slack? And I don't know if they've really shown that yet. I think so far it's just been so much their offense just destroying everybody. And so I think that's going to be a question mark with Miami. The Cowboys, man, the Cowboys should have everything. Like they have a good quarterback. They got a pretty good running game. Their defense is really good. There's talent up and down that roster. What happened to them in Arizona is just it's mind-boggling to me. I can't even like point at anything from a football standpoint that is wrong with them. It's just they just seem to have these games where you're kind of scratching your head like, what the hell was that? Like, why did they play so badly in Arizona? The Cardinals aren't even trying to win. Like, how do the Cowboys just lay an egg like that? But I think from a talent standpoint, when you look at the way they're constructed, I mean, I think you have to have the Cowboys up there right now.
I think they blew it a few times in the red zone, and if I'm not mistaken, was that right after the Trayvon Diggs injury? So maybe there was like a little bit of chaos with the team. I'm not sure. I think these two comments, the next two comments I'm going to show, really describe everything about the Dallas Cowboys. Nathan says he still thinks the Cowboys are the best team in the NFL. And Tang thinks that they're going to choke again in the playoffs. And I think you're probably both right.
Yep.
I think you guys nailed it. Yeah, I mean, what like every team's going to have a bad game. Last year, Kansas City lost to Indianapolis, so it happens. Like where you just have a no-show. I wouldn't knock them. Like that's why we do this. That's why we talk about the power of a team, where we're trying to like not overreact to certain things and like what's going to carry on. Dallas is very very good, and it seems like there's a little bit of a collision course with them still going, against San Francisco at some point, like our childhood. And
Yes.
Philadelphia's a weird one to peg too, because Philadelphia keeps winning, and they're what 4-0, and yet none of their wins have been really good. Like, so they dominated the Vikings, but it was a time like Philly fans were booing them off the field at one point, and against Washington. I still think that Terry McLaurin, I don't know if you saw the end of that game. Terry McLaurin, I think, made a catch in overtime where his toe was in bounds, but they couldn't overturn it because it's a noon Fox game. And so they didn't have like the 700 cameras and, the rules expert or whatever everywhere. But I think that they were that close to losing that game. And their defense is a little shoddy. I mean, they gave up a game tying drive to Sam Howell, best quarterback in the draft class, by the way, Sam Howell. Now, I mean, now that Kenny Pickett is garbage, like, right? I think it's Sam Howell. So anyway, I guess I think that Philadelphia still deserves to be talked about as very, very strong, but I'm not sure that they've been as convincing as some of the other teams.
Yeah, and I look back at that game with Washington yesterday. When Howell threw the touchdown pass to make it 31-30, I just kept saying, "Run, go for two, go for two. Riverboat
I know.
run, come on, go for two, go for the win." Like what just happened wasn't even supposed to happen. Like Sam Howell leading on a drive like that in a clutch situation like that, that was not supposed to happen. Just go for two in the win, and think about like what that could
No.
do for that football team if that happens and they win that game. So I knew as soon as he kicked the extra point, I was thinking the Eagles are going to win this game in overtime. I just felt it because I felt like that. I felt like Ron Rivera just let the Eagles get away with one there, and he should have taken advantage of it. But alas, here we are.
Here we are. And I mean, you just want coaches to sometimes understand the moment. Like you are the underdog in this game. You kind of lucked out to even be there. There was barely 1 second left on the clock. Like just give it a shot, man. Just try to win it right here instead of playing for overtime. Speaking of winning though, Manny, with our sponsor Prize Picks, I was a big winner this week. I went 3 for 3. So the way that it works with Prize Picks is you pick more or less with 3 players. They give you a number of yards that they're projecting them to get, and you have to pick more or less. And it's that easy. And I went 3 for 3. And thank you to Justin Fields for doing what I thought he was going to do, which was throw all over the Denver Broncos. And he went more, as Kirk Cousins went with less because I thought they would run the ball a lot. And then Josh Allen threw all over Miami, which I figured as well. So a great week for me with Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com. It's very easy to go, sign up, and play. And that's all you got to do. You just pick more or less with these players, and you're in. And if you go to prizepicks.com/purple and use the code purple, you get a first deposit match up to $100. So prizepicks.com/purple. And the reason I like it, Manny, is it's just not that expensive to play. I mean, you jump in, you're playing for a few bucks, you can win a good amount. It was a good week for me. Prizepicks.com/purple with the code purple. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right. Okay, that's interesting. Because I don't have the game on at the moment. That apparently Geno Smith got banged up, which that's what we're talking about, Manny. About the Vikings and their path is if something goes wrong for one of those teams that appears to be right there in the race, once again, the NFC is so insanely top heavy. And I wanted to ask you about this as well. How about the AFC? Getting CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, who have looked really, really good so far. And the one quarterback who hasn't in the draft that went to the NFC has not looked very good. How much would you react to what we've seen so far, knowing the history of quarterbacks, knowing how long it takes to really get an idea? But how much would you react to what we've seen so far from these rookie quarterbacks?
I think from what we've seen so far, I think it's pretty legitimate. And I don't, I'm not ready to give up on Bryce Young yet, but I think what we've seen so far is very concerning. I think his durability was a concern, from the very beginning. I've got some concerns about that. And I'm worried that he's not seeing the game that the way that he should. A couple of weeks ago we talked, or it might have even been last week or 2 weeks ago. I asked the question of, like, should he even really be playing right now? Like, should Andy Dalton be quarterbacking the Panthers right now and Bryce is sitting on the sidelines with a clipboard and he's just watching and learning? You know what I mean? Because some guys are ready to step in right away. And I think CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson have both shown that they're pretty ready to, they've had some bumps in the road too early on, like most young quarterbacks do, but they've seemed much more ready to go early on here. And I think in the case of Bryce Young, I think it's okay that he's not ready yet. I mean, the Panthers are not trying to win a Super Bowl this year. Nobody's picking them to do anything like that. So, I don't know what benching him now could potentially do for his confidence going forward, but I just wonder if he should be playing right now, because it just doesn't seem like he's seeing the field the way that he should. CJ Stroud, man, he's legit, man. I think him and Anthony Richardson are both legit, but CJ Stroud has really, really impressed me. Just the poise that he plays with. He's accurate. He's making pretty good decisions. He's not turning the ball. I don't think has he thrown a pick yet? I don't think he's thrown a pick yet, has he?
No,
Did he
I
throw
don't
one
think so.
yesterday?
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
mean,
so.
4 games into your career and you haven't thrown a pick yet, like that's impressive for a young guy like that. So, and Anthony Richardson is just so much fun, man. That kid is just you watch him. I mean, obviously we want him to continue to grow as a passer, and he's a much better passer than I think a lot of people were giving him credit for going into the draft. But to watch him run is just a treat. I mean, watching him just tuck the ball and take off against the Rams yesterday a few times was just really impressive. And he's just, there's so much of a, Dante Culpepper, Cam Newton, Josh Allen type of build with him because he's big, but he's also fast. He's just a freak athlete. And it's a lot of fun to watch him run, and he's just going to get better and better as a thrower too. And I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and what I see from both of those guys too, and you're right. I mean, I think Richardson, way too much was made of the throwing, and I know he's not going to complete 70% of his passes. He's not going to be like Dante in that way, right? Where Dante was absurdly accurate. That's never going to be who he is. But like Josh Allen still isn't, and sometimes you could survive that way. I never thought John Elway was the most precise passer, but was so physically gifted that he could throw it over the mountains and he can run people over and so forth. But what I've been so impressed from both those guys is their leadership. I mean, we're on teams that draft in the top 5 here, so these are bad franchises that have been a mess. I mean, last year Jim Irsay is hiring a TV analyst who was coaching high school. Tanky like a fox, Jim Irsay.
Yeah.
Tanky like a fox. Jim Irsay knows. He knows the deal. He knows, let's just accidentally end up with a top 5 pick and get this great quarterback prospect. Whoops, I hired the stupidest person to hire in the world. My bad. I guess you'll all forget this when Richardson is amazing. So here we are. But anyway, the point just being that, from the minute that these two guys seem to get there, they took command of these teams and they are totally in charge. And I really enjoy watching that. Richardson will miss some throws. That's going to happen. I mean, Josh Allen is a good comp, but also, Cam Newton wasn't as accurate to start as he ended up being at his peak. But when you're talking about somebody who's coming to the line of scrimmage, making the checks, making the plays, and reading the defenses properly, getting the football out. Neither one of these guys are making catastrophic mistakes. They're not getting sacked. They're not throwing picks. Like they just look so much more in command. Where Bryce Young, like even Bryce Young, I thought what he did pulling over the whole team and being like, it's on me, was very amateurish. Like it was very high schooly, like, guys, I'm here for you, whatever. And like, this guy is like, I, I know sometimes it takes like getting the boys fired up or whatever, but I just thought that was like, I don't see that very often in the NFL. Kirk throws a pick six, goes to the sideline, comes back out running the offense. Like you don't see after every mistake, these quarterbacks gathering everybody around. And you saw the body language of the Panthers players are like, okay, buddy, we're gonna go, work on our adjustments or whatever. Like he just doesn't look like he's really got it at the moment, and that could change. But we're talking about historical comps. I got nothing for Bryce Young. I've never seen a person this small play quarterback successfully, and you have to go back to my childhood to find like Doug Flutie, because even Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray are much thicker or much faster. One of the problems with Kyler Murray is he's not fast. Or I'm sorry, not Kyler Murray. With Bryce Young, he's not that fast. He
Right.
was running away from somebody and he wasn't really running away. Kyler Murray is insanely quick. Russell Wilson in his prime is insanely quick, and they could escape anything. But I didn't see that from Bryce Young. That's like a big, big, big concern. So I don't know. They need a lot on that team, but I'm not sure what the ceiling is for him. Anyway, before we wrap up, Manny,
Mm-hmm.
we got to name some Chiefs. They're playing the Chiefs. Let's talk about some Chiefs. Give me your top 3, 4, 5. There's a lot. So I could say, Manny, give me your top 23 Kansas City Chiefs of all time. And you probably would get to 23 easily. How about 5? Give me 5.
Okay.
And play along
Num-
in the comments too. Give me your favorite Kansas
yeah.
City Chiefs players ever. Go ahead.
Okay. Uh, well, the first one I'll go through is Steve Bono, and it's only really for one play, and I think you know what play I'm talking about.
I
They
do.
run this. The Chiefs are playing at Arizona. This was like 1995, I think maybe. Um, and he runs he runs like 75 yards for a touchdown because they run this great play fake and he just bootlegs out to the right side and takes off. It must have taken him like 20 seconds to run 75 yards for the touchdown, but it was just amazing and the Cardinals were completely fooled. So Steve Bono is that one for me. Derek Thomas was just an absolute legend. Legit, like great player, great pass rusher, great leader. Tragically, we lost him at such a young age. But just an amazing and incredible player to watch. Willie Roaf is another one too, really good. One of the great offensive linemen that we've seen, certainly in the last 30 years or so. Dante Hall is another one that really stands out. One of the great kick and punt returners that we've had. I mean, I'm a big Devin Hester guy, and I think Devin Hester is the greatest kick returner ever. But Dante Hall, if he would have had a chance to have a longer career, I think could have been right up there as well. So Dante Hall is another one, and then Trent Green, I think, was a really solid quarterback for them for a few years. And so, yeah, I'm trying to think of a fifth one. I guess I'll go maybe Tony Gonzalez, just being a great, pass catching tight end. And, I'm always kind of partial to those tight ends that like played basketball in college too, like Antonio Gates. Mo Alley Cox of the Colts, like didn't play college football at all. He played basketball at VCU. He turned himself into a pretty solid tight end in the NFL too. But yeah, so I'll go Tony Gonzalez there too.
So just to read some from the comments, Joe Montana, obviously,
Yeah.
what I loved about the Joe Montana era was, and this is only, I mean, you got to really be a certain age to be talking about the Joe Montana era of Kansas City, and I recognize that, but Montana had nothing left. I mean, nothing. And he's throwing check downs to like Kimball Anders over and over again. And the dude found a way. They were great teams during that time. They didn't even have great wide receivers. He just found a way. I don't even know how. like throwing little short passes underneath and everything, and he like grinded it out. Christian Okoye is one of the coolest stories of all time. The
Yeah.
football life on him, coming from he was what was it, track and field, and again a guy who had never played before. I mean, just like one of the coolest stories ever. So definitely shout out to him for that. Derek Thomas, you mentioned, but one of my favorite players ever. Amir Smith Marset, the natural ironic pick, didn't have the revenge game with Carolina, but still is kicking around there. Obviously, like, Travis Kelce's a great player. Tony Gonzalez, as you mentioned. Joe Alt is that's a great pull. Very
Yeah.
good pull. The most underappreciated running back who probably belongs in the Hall of Fame, Jamal Charles. Every
Yeah.
running back, from just because of how things are, is looked at like, who cares? But Jamal Charles averaged like 5.4 yards carry for his career. The dude had like Barry Sanders numbers without Barry Sanders highlights, and belongs in the Hall. I don't know why he's not. Probably just because of how underrated those guys are. Will Shields, man. I mean, one of the great guards in the history of the game. Huge fan of Will Shields. How about when Neil Smith went over and played for the Kansas City Chiefs? That was great. And one of the Viking legends ever to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, Tyler Thigpen, who was picked up. Everybody always worries about what happens if you drop a player and you try to get them to your practice squad, but they get picked up. Tyler Thigpen got picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs and started a few games. Dan Saliamula, how about that one? Justin Houston, who's still around, a great player. This is a great history. You go on forever. James Hasty was a great player for them. How about Eric Berry? Didn't he beat leukemia or cancer or something and return?
Former
One of their
Tennessee
great players
ball.
ever. Yeah, I mean, so this to me was for the longest time. Oh, and then there's the Steve DeBerg era, Marcus Allen, of course. This was for the longest time the AFC Vikings, and it's only changed in the last 5 years since. Oh yeah, they drafted a quarterback when they were an average to good team. Shocking. Oh, Priest Holmes. Yeah, Priest Holmes was so cool. Priest Holmes had like a aesthetic. He was super cool. But yeah, I just think it's interesting. The Kansas City, and I want to talk more about this with I'm going to have Sam McDowell on the show, who's in Kansas City, great sports writer. They were us. We were them. And it all changed. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but that's what happened.
Well, Alex Smith, I think, is another one that I think we should probably mention too. I mean, really, really nice run. Obviously they ended up going with Mahomes and moving on from him, but Alex Smith was a guy that just the ultimate professional, man, and had his career got off to such a rough start in San Francisco. Then Jim Harbaugh got on board and he kind of found himself again, and then Andy Reid took him in and really gave him a sort of a rejuvenated career and had a really nice run for about 5 or 6 years with the Chiefs too. So shout out to Alex Smith as well.
I'll never forget that the first person that was brought up by Patrick Mahomes when they ran up to him after winning the Super Bowl was Alex Smith. And that speaks to character right there, because that guy was in a position that nobody would enjoy after winning a bunch of games and being a franchise quarterback and then having someone else take your job. Since it has hit 9 o'clock, I always say on the show, Manny, we get one or two weird things after 9 o'clock, after we've been going for like the right amount of time. Let's just say it. Oh, Marty Schottenheimer, of course. Another great A Football Life documentary.
Yeah.
You think she's coming? You think she's coming? You think she's going to be here? You
Yeah,
think Taylor Swift's going to be here?
she's gonna be there. She's gonna be there. She was already at US Bank Stadium earlier this year, selling out the place. Yeah, you went, didn't you? Didn't you go to one of
I
those
did.
shows?
She played a great show. I mean, look, I know some of her music. They asked me in the comments once to name my 5 favorite songs. I was like, guys, this isn't the Kansas City Chiefs roster. I can't do this with Taylor Swift songs. I just went to the show. But it's one of the things that I would like to say about the Taylor Swift thing is, if you feel like this has been annoying, you're right. It has. In fact, when it was like 17-2 against the Jets, I wasn't really paying attention to the broadcast because I just didn't want to hear the Taylor Swift stuff every 2 seconds. I was like, I just don't, come on, I just, stop. Um, So it's annoying. It's gotten annoying. It's overkill when we're all doing which Kansas City Chiefs players are like Taylor Swift songs. Stop. Just calm down. Stop being weird. Okay. People have been weird. The other side of that, people have been weird too, though. Like everyone's been weird about it. It's like the over obsession with Travis Kelce from her fans. That's weird.
Yep.
The people who get real angry at her. That's also weird. She's fine. I mean, she makes pretty good music. She puts on a great show. She's a big celebrity. I don't know what you want. Like, whatever. Like, people who get upset at her. Like, I don't know. Just in general in life, Manny. I like to think if it, don't go out of your way to find more reasons to be angry. Like life is hard enough. So be angry at like, I don't know, world hunger. Like don't be mad at Taylor Swift. So anyway, that's what I think. So as you're going through this week, already we've got a little bit of a silly headline with Byron Murphy saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to say something to Travis Kelce about it on the field." It's like, "Oh, bulletin board for Taylor?" Like, I don't know. Like, let's stop. But do you listen to her music at all? Do you have a thought on Taylor Swift?
It's never really been my cup of tea, her music, but I mean, listen, there's a lot of musical artists that have not been my cup of tea that are insanely popular. And the way I look at it is just, you know what? If they've got enough people that like their music and will do whatever it takes to go and watch them perform, I mean, they're doing something right. So it's hard to really hate on that. I've got my own, I'm a hip hop head, so I've got my own sort of like personal favorite hip hop artist that a lot of people wouldn't give two damns about. It's okay. It's fine. I mean, you know what? If Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are really happy together, who the hell are we to complain about it? That's the way I
We're,
view it.
we can complain about the number of shots to her in the box. I think
Yeah.
oh look, Taylor reacts to the tush push or whatever. Like we don't we don't need that. We don't need that. It's too much. But that okay. This is funny. It wasn't some NFL player dating Doja Cat? Yeah. Now they can have her perform. She's pretty talented. But yeah, I mean, look. It's not Prince, everybody. It's not the greatest musical genius I've ever seen in my life, but it's all right. And here's what I would say. First, you can sing along with a lot of songs. So as they play them, you could do do do. You sing along with it. It's fine. It's I annoyed my wife by saying like a lot of these are kind of like nursery rhymes. They're more than songs, and that didn't go over well. But somebody did a YouTube video where they pointed out that 21 of her songs have the same chord progression, which is pretty funny. It's like, hey, she knows what works, and we're a business here. I respect her business acumen. Actually, that's something I truly have a great respect for. But it's see, I don't agree with this. I don't think anyone's acting, Nathan. I don't think anyone's acting like she's Michael Jackson. I don't think anyone says this is like the greatest singer ever or Prince or whatever. I think she just has a lot of fans who really love her music. They love her brand. They really buy into it. And that's totally okay. I would just like to welcome the Swifties to the show. And so if they want to learn about three techs, reach blocks, why I love the kick return, I'd be happy to explain it.
And neck
So
rolls.
anyway,
Neck
and neck,
rolls
of
too.
course, neck rolls should really. It's like this, ladies, neck rolls. Anyway, that's enough. So Manny, that I don't know if it'll be the last time we talk about Taylor Swift on the show, but probably. Great stuff, Manny. Thursday night, we will be back as usual, previewing the game in a little more of a hardcore fashion and diving into such other NFL headlines. So great stuff from you. Thanks everybody for joining and playing along in the comments. And oh, by the way, my book's out tomorrow. My book is out tomorrow. I'm going to post the link in the comments here for anybody who wants to check it out. Football is a numbers game. PFF and how a data-driven approach shook up the game. We'll see how it goes. I'm very interested to see what people think of it. Now it's actually going to be in people's hands. I spent 2 years reporting on PFF, what they do for teams, how they helped Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah get to the GM of the Vikings, how they were invented the football Billy Bean. There's a lot in there. I put a lot of work into it. So if you have a chance to check it out, please do. And you'll hear more about that later in the week. So thanks, Manny. And we will catch y'all later. Football